Genetics and the genius of the Emperor are the foundations of the Marines and their Primarchs who defend the Imperium. Where did this gene code come from? Not just the Emperor's mind. It involved others, a gene cult on Luna. The Emperor also let the cult live when so much of the rest of the enemies around Tela were conquered. Why? And what price was paid to keep the genecraft dubbed the Sancprimus Portum out of the hands of the War Master during the Siege of Terra? Friends, let's find out, and welcome to another 40k video. One note before we start is that the Sancprimus Portum is referred to as the Magna Mater in the story. Mankind will destroy itself, Vita 37 says. That is likely true, agreed Heliosa 54. But we too are a branch of that shared root. Yes, we distill the essence of singular genetic paths in search of the perfect aspects of our species, but follow the strands of history back far enough, and we are not so different. She felt Talab Vita 37's urge to challenge that assertion. The Emperor's transhuman warriors are bred to wreak bloody ruin and nothing else. They are capable of nothing else, but we of the Selenar cults, by iterating upon the twin mysteries of the Helix, perform acts of delation and creation. The gene rights of the Emperor pursue only the science of death, and it is too late for them to change their course. And our sciences? Do we not also craft engines of steel and flesh? Yes, for the defence of our fiefdoms, Talab Vita 37 conceded, but the Dianic rights brings us closer to the true potential of humanity. Ultimately, they will move us further from the urge to destroy. Why does the Emperor seek to destroy us? Asked Talab Vita 37. The Emperor does not seek to destroy us. He seeks to yoke us to his great work. Not without some justification. He hopes we fear annihilation more than servitude. His hubris requires our science, our looms and our mysteries. He knows much, but he does not know everything. If the Emperor kills me with his Marines, there will be so much lost. If the Emperor's killers do not find me here, they will tear Luna apart until they do. They will break me and I will be forced to give them the Magna Mater. Talab Vita 37 flinched at the thought and said, "What is it you require of me?" "Take the Magna Mater and vanish. I cannot divulge what I do not know." And so Heliosa 54 waited. She knew the Emperor would hear her. She hoped his warriors would too. "Call off your wool," she begged. Later, during the Siege of Terra, traitor forces seek the Magna Mater. A distress signal was sent out, asking for help, and it was picked up by some loyalists from the shattered legions of Istvan. The Marines are told what the Magna Mater is. Tarsa confirmed. Broadly speaking, their cults believe each individual is but the sum total of genetic archetypes that have endured throughout human history. Like most faiths, they are heavily fictionalized, what they believe in, and they have been broken down into cults that venerate the helical mysteries of our species in different ways. The Selenar had two things the Emperor needed: a knowledge of genecraft that outstripped his own, and industrial scale facilities to match the scope of his ambition. I think here basically the Emperor can create the Marines, and they can create some pretty good Marines, obviously the Custodians etc. as well, but these guys just help him push things a little bit further. We'll see an example of that later on in the video. So the Selenar are spared obliteration because they have those facilities and the gene help. The Emperor yoked Luna's cults and tasked them with building armies mighty enough to conquer a galaxy. The Magna Mater, its literal meaning, is Great Mother, an ancient Romanine name for Cybele, the Anatolian goddess of fertility and creation. Said Thamatica, "Yes, during my time on Lena, it was little more than a myth, said to be the fabled fountainhead of the earliest and most powerful space marine genetics." They meet Talab Vita 37, who wants to destroy the Magna Mater before it falls into the hands of the traitors. The Marines designed to preserve it, so the Master of Mankind can build from the ashes after the heresy is over. And after speaking with the Gene Witch, as she meets the Marines, 37 observes some improvements her people might have made. 10th Legion, 3rd generation, Medusa born, said Talab Vita 37. Blood type XR, positive theta, part of the Omnia Schiaparelli stratum. High concentrations of the Stelix genotype, a modification of the Gajana generation pairings. Too high really, can lead to a predisposition for pain-induced psychotrauma. But I expect you already know that, the Marine agreed. Your Legion's gene code is concentrated beyond what we advised. Your sire always did like to push things further than he ought to. Later, what's in there? Asked Shawakeen. The growth chambers, said Vita 37, where viable subjects were hot-housed and matured in gene pods. The freaks are monsters? Shawakeen asked. Is that all that's left here? No, said Tyrlab 37. We purged all the monsters the Emperor couldn't use. She later says they were made to join the Emperor. The official story was they had seen the Emperor's vision being won over by what he wanted for the Imperium. As they near the vaults, we see that the traitors who had tried to get into the gene vaults have been killed. They suffer under a mutagen made by Vita 37. They are attacked, then, Vita and the Loyalists, and Vita says the freaks and monsters were not all destroyed. When challenged on this, she says, I lied. A screaming howl burst from the left, and Trastevere, who is a traitor Marine, and a son of Horus I believe, turned in time to see his rear guard barreled from his feet by something as hulking as he was, wet and stinking. Its flesh was bloated and ghoul-pallid from long immersion in unknown fluids. It trailed drooling cables from unfinished plug ports in its spine. It howled in fury, the nightmarish creation of a mad anatomist, a freak of nature that had somehow not spontaneously aborted itself. Even the stuttering light of the chamber and the speed with which it moved couldn't conceal its hideous form, swollen, twisted, musculature and plastic limbs, now fused with organs and bone horns, growing beyond its flesh, distended nubs of bone and flopping sheets of unused skin, gristle and meat formed from aberrant genomes, never intended for human flesh smithing, and teeth, so many teeth. It lifted fists like forged hammers and slammed them down in a two-handed blow that crushed the warrior's helmet and skull to shards. It killed, but many more awaken and aid it. The original creature is killed, the traitors carry on fighting. These abominations take entire magazines of shells to kill. The ones there tear through the armour of the Sons of Horus like paper. Vornak howled in anger as a creature with 6 brutally strong arms ripped his storm bolter, and then his arm, from him. He took a quarter step back and pistoned his remaining fist through the creature's face. It didn't stop, for it had other faces, one half submerged in a fold of flesh that was frilled like a lizard's, one with a fang-toothed orifice that served as its mouth. Another creature had what looked like steel cabling for sinews, and the multifaceted eyes of an arachnid, and yet another was strangely and ethereally beautiful, that it reminded Trastevere of the time he had seen the Phoenician fighting on the fields of Istvan. So maybe even some Primarch characteristics here have been built into these abominations. Vornak fell beneath the pounding fists of the bestial mob. They tore his throat out, and as one lifted its head with a mouthful of blood meat in its jaws, Trastevere saw an echo that was so dreadfully familiar to him that he actually paused in shock. Among these attackers, it had a face that was entirely human, or more accurately, entirely transhuman. It had the same wide gene-bulked cheekbones and high forehead common to most legionaries, but with a distinct echo of the sardonic, hawkish features of Horus Lupercal himself. Now, just to clarify here, I don't really think these gene witches have created the Primarchs before the Emperor or anything like that, but I do think through their work with the Emperor, they've created some foundational genetics that he was able to use when creating his Astartes and their Primarch fathers. Trastevere's anger threatened to overwhelm him, but he was just staring and did not succumb to emotion. He detached from the primal urge to strike out in blind fury. He compartmentalized his rage, ready to unleash it upon the loyalist legionaries. 5 of his men were down, the others bloodied but still fighting with rigid discipline. That was the difference here. That would decide the fight. The monsters had no honed skill and no discipline. They did not fight as a unified whole, but as individual monsters. All of the rescue ships, loyalist marines, as they defend the Magnimator, are killed, except for 2. The traitors are held off or killed, and it falls to Shawakeen, who hides on an abandoned ship and goes into suspended animation with the Magnimator. And later, once it's been passed around a little bit, the Magnamator gets to Abute, who passes this to Call, who creates the Primaris, as what Shuriken rescued was more potent than the standard DNA of the Space Marines, and the Magnamator of the Magnus Portum is now kept on the flagship of Belisarius Call in M40. Now friends, I turn things over to you. Were you aware of this additional bit of lore? Do you think the genetics and its creation of the Primax, etc., should just be narrowly in the hands of the Emperor in lore terms? I do like this addition. It makes sense to me that more than one person would have input into it, but I would credit the Emperor with deciding what he's put in and what he's taken out. But clearly these gene witches were of benefit to him, since he's forgiven them things like the genetic creatures that we're creating, when normally he would have destroyed them for not being compliant. Anyway, comment down below, let me know what you think.